Donald Trump's Justice Department has threatened a criminal investigation about the New York Times reporting on the plane that Donald Trump accepted as a gift from Qatar. And the New York Times response to that threat is to keep investigating that plane. A New York Times investigation of Donald Trump's acceptance of the gift of a Boeing 747 from a Qatari dictator led to, quote, ballooning costs and trade-offs in safety features in the attempt to convert that plane to a version of Air Force One. The massive investigative report written by Maggie Haberman, Tyler Pager, and our next guest, Eric Lipton, cites multiple sources who described the sensitive information about the process and the plane on the condition of anonymity, and states, quote, Donald Trump was personally engaged in making decisions about the retrofitting of the donated plane, giving the final approval on the features and security measures that would be included. Several key security and safety features on the Boeing planes that have been used for decades as Air Force One are not visible on the upgraded jet, including a lower level exit for high risk situations, additional backup power capacity, and an advanced anti-missile system, public Air Force records and photographs examined by the Times show. The government spent hundreds of millions of dollars to purchase equipment needed to train pilots to fly the 747-8 plane so quickly, on top of the approximately $400 million cost of the upgrades that the administration has publicly acknowledged. The Pentagon has tried to mask the total price tag, including from Congress, by taking the funds from a classified budget for nuclear modernization. The Times reports that experts say this kind of upgrade would normally take several years, but Donald Trump's demands gave them about 8 months. And due to that rush, quote, some White House officials initially expected it would only be used for domestic travel or to visit allied countries with U.S. military bases. The White House press secretary, who has lied about virtually everything she has ever said in the White House, claims that the plane is safe for presidential travel. Of course, how would she have any idea? In a separate news report for the Times, Eric Lipton reports this about Donald Trump's nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia. It may also contribute to a major trend in Mr. Trump's second term, allowing the government to help enrich the president, his family advisors, and others in his orbit. And of course, Donald Trump and his friends may be helped as a result of orchestrating that Saudi nuclear deal. A number of the president's allies and relatives, including members of his cabinet, stand to benefit if this big bet on nuclear power pays off. Certain investors with ties to these deals are positioned to profit even if the delivery of large new loads of nuclear-powered electricity remains years away. The White House Assistant Press Secretary, of course, big surprise, denies any possible financial motive for the Trumps in that deal with Saudi Arabia. Joining us now is New York Times investigative reporter Eric Lipton. Eric, first, to the plane Donald Trump wants to use as Air Force One and then keep for himself, your reporting continues to find more ways in which this plane really doesn't qualify, doesn't make the grade as a usable Air Force One. What else have we been discovering about the plane?
It's just that, for decades, the American government has seen Air Force One as a kind of flying Oval Office in which a president should be able to operate and command the military and engage with foreign leaders at any time, never with any disruption in the communication, and be able to land at airports that don't have ground crews that would traditionally service the plane. And so it really is a flying war platform. I mean, it's even designed to be able to sustain the electromagnetic pulse of if there were to be a nuclear attack and to keep flying. So there's all kinds of redundancies that are built into this plane. It makes it's not really anything like a passenger airplane. And so, what we found was that in order to try to get this plane ready as fast as possible for the president at his insistence, that they skipped a number of the upgrades, particularly if they were going to require structural changes. So as you said, for example, there's a lower level exit and entrance, which has a built-in stairwell, so you don't need to rely on ground crews. That was the stairwell that President George W. Bush used on September 11th of 2001, guarded by, machine gun carrying military on a day in which the United States was under attack. It was also a stairwell that President Trump himself used in October of 2025 when there was a perception that there may have been a threat at Palm Beach Airport. So he used those lower steps. But those lower steps don't exist on the new plane. And that's just one of a number of security upgrades that they didn't build in because President Trump wanted the plane so quickly.
How long will it take now? What do we know about the grounding of the plane now, and at what point Donald Trump will try to fly it again?
Well, I mean, all they've said so far is that they expect some point later this year to do additional upgrades. The president has referred to as maxing it up or maxing it out. And they said they're going to do that in about a month. So it's not really possible to make structural changes to a 747-8 in a month. I mean, if you're going to cut a hole in the plane, it needs to be suspended on this incredibly sophisticated platform to prevent like gravity stress on the plane. So, any kind of major changes you're going to make are going to take a lot longer than a month. So it's unclear what they can pull off in a month, but they're going to try to make some upgrades as we understand it.
And what is the total cost of this venture as of tonight, as far as we know?
I mean, they've said that initially that it wasn't going to exceed $400 million, but then they spent at least another $400 million on planes that are going to be used, that were used to train the pilots and also for spare parts. So that's $800 million there. Now those two planes, they bought two planes from Lufthansa. These are 747-8s. They bought another two planes. I mean, the first one they bought because they had to move super fast to train pilots because the Qatari jet is quite different from the old Air Force One. So it has much more, much different electronics. So the pilots had to be trained in how to use it. So they bought another Lufthansa plane to train the pilots because they had so little advance warning that this was going to happen. So that's another hundreds of millions of dollars in additional cost. But the short answer is we don't know. And it's really unusual because the cost of building a new presidential airplane has always been a public matter. It's in the Pentagon budgets. We know that it's going to cost them about $5.1 billion to do the two new Air Force Ones that Boeing's building that are going to be ready starting in 2028. But we really have no idea how much they spent on retrofitting the Qatari jet.
Eric Lipton, thank you very much for your invaluable reporting on this.
Thank you so much.